Have I ever read the Bible?
No.
I haven't read the Bible.
For my own reasons, no.
I've skimmed it.
I have read the Bible.
I kind of looked at little segments, but I've never actually attempted to read the whole thing.
It's not advertised enough. Like, I don't go to church, so the time when I do read it is when I'm in church. But other than that, I don't have a copy of the Bible. Yeah.
They're interesting stories, like as a guide for people how to live, not necessarily taken literally.
I thought it was daunting.
It's been a long time, so I don't really remember everything.
Story of Adam and Eve.
Yeah, Adam and Eve.
Like stories about Jesus and his life.
Up there, of course, there's Genesis.
I don't know the difference between sort of like the different books and stuff. But I do know Genesis is the first one. Or is that an argument? I don't know.
Good evening. I don't know what goes through your mind when the Bible's mentioned. Do you think that it's sort of outdated, it's boring, it's full of contradictions, it's got names that you can't pronounce, it's an ancient book? And what use is it possibly to someone living today? Well, that's what I used to think for nearly 38 years of my life. The first encounter I had with the Bible was in a Manchester court. It's when I placed my hand on it and I said, I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. Soon after that short sentence, I was given a prison sentence and headed off to a prison called Risley, in between Manchester and Liverpool. I was born into a really dysfunctional family. Both my parents were alcoholics. They were both from Liverpool, and they were both atheists, nothing to do with God whatsoever. My father was big and unpredictable. He would break out into violent attacks when you had no idea what was going to happen. Not violent to me, but to everyone else around him. My mother was small and volcanic, and she could tear you apart with her tongue. I mean, she could start an argument in an empty room and possibly win. So the two of them together were a real strong combination. We lived in Manchester, a place called Salford, where I was born. We lived on some pretty rough estates, as I remember growing up. So my childhood wasn't a brilliant time for me. I'm sure there's people in here that are a lot worse. But having two alcoholic parents will knock most things out of you, especially any hope or trust that you might have had in people, basically. At 15, two things happened to me almost simultaneously. I was expelled from school, I was bullied, I was in a comprehensive school, and I hated it, and I was expelled for truancy, because I didn't want to go. And at the same time that happened, I got into an argument with my father. My father went to hit my mother. I stood in the gap, and I got the hit that my mother was going to get, and a big argument happened. And basically, my father told me to get out. And in my youth and arrogance, I grabbed a few clothes in a bag and set off, and soon realized I had no idea where I was going. So I was homeless for a while, lived on the streets in Manchester. I moved into a squat with a group of people, an empty house in a place called Stockport, and they looked after me a little bit, but that led me into crime. Petty theft at first, robbing from shops and then houses and factories and warehouses, and it just progressed, and that led to fines, bound over to keep the peace, probation, and finally my prison sentence, which I mentioned at the beginning. I came out of prison and headed home. My parents didn't come to see me, but I wanted to be back at home in this family unit, even though it was dysfunctional. But unfortunately for me, both my parents had divorced while I was in prison and actually disappeared to different areas. One went to Liverpool, one went to Manchester. So it was while living in a bedsit in a place called Didsbury in Manchester and holding down two jobs, a driving job during the day and working in a bar at night, that I saw a poster for the military, for the army. And it said underneath it, "Do you want a life of adventure?" And it was brilliant marketing when I think of it. It was mountains, there was snow-capped, it was a blue sky, it was sunny, and they were in combat kit, and they were skiing, and they were smiling. And I thought, you know what? I want some of that on that poster. So I went into the recruiting office, and after some interviews and a lot of persuasion by me, I finally enlisted into the British Army. That was the second encounter I had with a Bible in my whole life. It was this one here. I put my hand on it again, in front of a major in the British Army, and I swore allegiance to the crown. I was given a day's pay, and I was accepted into the army and sent off for basic training. And this Bible I still have. It says this book was used in the enlistment ceremony of Paul Cowley on enlistment into the British Army at Manchester on the 15th of the 1st, 76. It is presented on behalf of Her Majesty the Queen for personal use as a source of spiritual and moral guidance during their army service. At 21, I was posted to Germany to 49 Field Regiment. I got married straight away. At 22, I had my son, Clinton. He was born. It was a great day. At 25, I couldn't handle the responsibility of trying to be a faithful husband and a father. So I got divorced. I sent my son and my wife back to England, and I carried on with my career. And I didn't see my son, Clinton, for several years. Why? Because I was a coward, basically. We would spend the day together, as you do, and then I'd take him back home, hand him over to his mum, and Clinton would simultaneously burst into tears. And I couldn't handle it. And I did what I always did. When things got a bit tough or difficult, I ran away. I shut the door and I disappeared and I forgot about it. At 27, I married again. At 29, another divorce. And that was my life, basically, without going into that much detail. It was full of drink, debt, divorce, and mostly full of quiet despair. The only stable thing I had in my career, the only stable thing I had in my life was my military career. I spent just over 16 years in the army, doing anything really that came my way and volunteering for everything. I volunteered for 2 tours of Northern Ireland. I volunteered for the Falklands, postings, courses, 4 different regiments. And my last 4 years in the army were Army Physical Training Corps as an adventure trainer. So eventually, I got to ski, that it said on the poster. The army physically saved my life. It really did. It grabbed hold of me and it helped me. But morally and spiritually, I was completely void of anything. No moral compass whatsoever. Completely bankrupt in that area. I left the army after 16 and a half years and I started work in the fitness industry because I was qualified through the physical training corps. And I ran a couple of health clubs in London. They were great jobs. Really well paid, fun to do, but really not satisfied. As Kami said in that interview, just still not there, whatever there was. And a few years ago now, I walked in through those doors you came in tonight to do an Alpha course. Why? Actually, at the time, I had no idea. And as I went through the course like you're doing, I struggled with bits of it. The weekend, which is coming up next weekend, came about, and I went on it reluctantly, and I was in this slightly depressing seaside resort, not like the one you're going to, of course. But I was in this slightly depressing, quiet, dull resort. But it was there that I met with God, and it was a real shock, probably for both of us. Because one, I didn't think God was looking for someone like me. I've explained a little bit, but I wouldn't go into great detail. I'd be embarrassed. But I met the God that wasn't vengeful that I'd heard about, that wasn't judgmental that I'd heard people talk about, especially my father. I met his son, Jesus. And it was a real shock for me because I knew nothing about him. But I quickly realized he seemed to understand people like me coming from my background. And that he didn't judge me, and that he loved me. And then I heard that he loved me unconditionally. And that was a really big deal for me, to love unconditionally. And since that weekend, my life started to change. Slowly, some of my fears and anxieties started to drift away, and slowly I started to trust people again. But my life definitely started to change. I married my girlfriend. We'd been living together for 8 years, both a little bit marriage phobic for obvious reasons. I got my relationship back with my son, Clinton. I've got a daughter, Phoebe, who's gorgeous and 19 and is still my baby girl, even though she hates me saying that. And I'm doing what I believe God has called me to do. Working with prisoners, homeless, ex-offenders, addicts, people with mental health issues, people who are struggling, and people, when you read the Bible, Jesus seemed to hang around with quite a lot and didn't judge them, but helped them. And in 2002, after 3 years of theology training, I was ordained into the Church of England as a priest. How that happened, I'm still slightly confused. But how did all that change start to happen? It started for me when I decided to listen instead of talking all the time, and to listen possibly to God, to take some guidance, to take some advice, to start reading that book that's near you, the Bible, which I'd never picked up before. For me, both of those, guidance, listening, and reading, were real humbling experiences for me. I don't really care anymore how God does the stuff that he says he does. I stopped worrying about it. I've stopped trying to work it out. I've stopped trying to think it away, because I know he really works. And I know he works because I'm standing here before you talking about him as a changed man. He's not perfect. He's still trying to get his act together, but I've changed. And only God can do that. And how else do I know that? Because there's a piece of scripture in the Bible that says God will restore the years that the locusts have eaten. How does he do that? I don't care. But the reason I know he does that, because I got my relationship back with my son, who I dearly love, and is here tonight supporting me as I speak. Clint, would you stand? How he does all that stuff, and I've mentioned really cookie, I have no idea, but I don't care anymore. I just know he does it. So some facts about the Bible that I had no idea about when I encountered it. I didn't know that it's a very popular book. It's the most successful book of all time. Over 5 billion are printed. Every year, 100 million are sold or given away to people. It's the bestseller every single year. I didn't know either that it's a very powerful book. One former prime minister described the Bible as highly explosive. It has an impact on people's lives when they read it. One guy I knew in prison, in Dartmoor prison, who was doing an Alpha course, used to take the Bible and put it on his pillow and put his head on the pillow because he wanted it all to go in, and he would sleep on it every night. I didn't really know that it was a very precious book either. At her coronation, our Queen was presented with a copy of the Bible, and these words were said to her: "We present you with this book, the most valuable thing this world affords," the Bible. The book itself is only a means to an end. It's just pages with writing on it. That's all it is, a book. And that's why for years I carried this book around, which I've still got. And I couldn't understand it. I couldn't read it. It frustrated me. I've thrown it at walls. I've thrown it across a room. Yet still, I've got it. And the fact that I carried it around was not because I wanted some spiritual input. It's because I heard of a soldier in the First World War who used to carry it in his breast pocket. And as he went over the trenches, he got shot, and a bullet hit the Bible and saved his life. So through 2 tours of Northern Ireland and the Falklands, I carried this Bible in my top pocket, just hoping if anything did go wrong, it might save my life. I tried to read it so many times. Like I said, Ireland, Falklands, various operations, different regiments, when I was struggling, divorces. And I couldn't understand a word it was trying to say to me. And I know why I couldn't understand it now, because I had no relationship with the author. I didn't know him. No one had told me about him, like you're hearing about him tonight. I didn't know that it's an inspired book either. Jesus says, "It is written, people do not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God." I didn't know that. Material things alone don't satisfy. You know, I've tried lots of stuff. I filled my life with so many things, even the best human relationships, and I've tried a considerable amount of them as well, don't ultimately satisfy us in the end. There's a spiritual hunger in all of us. It's this longing for God. It may manifest in different ways, but there's a desire in us to belong to someone, to be around someone that's bigger than us, who can look after us and understand us, to have a relationship with our Creator. God's longing to communicate with us, to be in this relationship that you've heard about over the last 6 weeks with us. And the primary way that he speaks to us is through the Bible, the Word of God. St. Paul puts it like this: all Scripture is inspired by God. But what does that mean to you and me now? To be inspired by God, what does that mean? Well, when you read it, it has a ring of truth about it, even if you don't admit it to yourself like I didn't. It proves when you read it to be inspired. When you read it and you put into practice the things that you've read about, they start to work, like I've briefly explained in my life. I learned about the Bible on the Alpha course like you are, and it's there I started to understand what it was trying to say to me. It's there I started to understand that God had a plan for me. And when I felt this call to work in prison work, in and outside of prison, I was really confused, because prison for me as a young man frightened the life out of me. And I've honestly tried to stay out of it all my life. And I started to going back into them most days, and it was really weird and confusing and uncomfortable. And then reading the Bible one day, I came across a piece of scripture in the Old Testament. It's in Jeremiah chapter 29. It says this, that it says really that God has a plan for our lives, a plan to prosper us and not to harm us, a plan to give us hope and a future. And as I read it, I thought, there's a plan. Nobody told me there was a plan for my life. I thought you just got on with it every single day. And I got really excited, and those pieces of those words started to stand out in the Bible. They kind of jumped out at me. And I thought maybe prison was my plan. Maybe prison was my destiny. Not that I was looking forward to that. And the Bible's made up of the Old Testament, the history of the Jewish people, and the New Testament, the life of Jesus, and the beginning of the early church. It was written over a period of 1,600 years by many individuals, over 40 of them, really. Kings, scholars, philosophers, fishermen, poets, statesmen, historians, scholars, doctors. And they wrote different types of literature over those years, such as history, poetry, prophecy, letters. It's all in there. So it's 100% the work of human hands, the writing of it. But what the writer is trying to say when he says it's 100% inspired by God is sort of, well, the example would be Sir Christopher Wren, the greatest English architect of his time, always known for building St. Paul's Cathedral. But he didn't lay a single brick. Hundreds and maybe thousands of bricklayers laid that building to make it the icon of what it is. But he is credited with it. He is the inspiration. He is the passion. One mind, one architect, one decision, inspired by him. And it's the same with the Bible. Many different writers, one architect, one vision, one passion, one inspiration behind it. It's an analogy you can use for it. It can be a really difficult read. I still struggle with some parts of it. And if you've ever read the Bible, particularly parts of the Old Testament, you'll find moral difficulties. I'm not making excuses for that. They're there. There are very different kinds of writing as you go through it and you read it. Some lean towards the metaphorical. Some are heavy with imagery. Some are deeply poetic. And you have to read it carefully and sometimes go back and digest it again. But even after that, you're left with some things that are still difficult in the Bible to understand and to swallow. Like the issue of suffering. No easy answers for that. It's difficult to believe that God is a God of love, yet we have all this suffering that we read all the time in the papers and the stuff that's going on. That's really hard work. And understandably, some people reject Christianity on the basis of that, and I can understand why they might do that. But what I found is that the more you try to wrestle with these two big issues, the love of God and the suffering that we see around the world, and there's no easy answers, but the more we explore and the more we wrestle with these two issues, what I found is the greater understanding that I have of the love of God and the suffering in the world. But you have to find that stuff out yourself. No one can tell you. Try and view the Bible as inspired by God, and then wrestle with the difficulties of mankind. Don't be scared of it. Try and understand them. tackle them. I mean, I'm getting old now, so I've started to like crosswords. I love them actually, but you know, with crosswords, if you don't get a clue, if you can't get one, you get stuck on a word, you don't bin the crossword, you move on to another column and you try and get a word. And then when you get one word, then you can find a letter in another word, and then you find another, and it starts to come together as a crossword or like a puzzle. It's not easy. And I haven't finished working this book out yet. Maybe I never will. But like myself, I'd encourage you to wrestle with it and have a go of it. I didn't know that the Bible is a very practical book either until I started reading it. The Bible just isn't an inspired book. It's a practical book as well. It's been described as a manual for life to help you get through the tricky bits. Practical wisdom on leading a healthy and fulfilling life. And boy, did I need some teaching on that. And if you follow it, it says that your life will be like a well-watered garden. And I've always kept that imagery in my head. A well-watered garden, nourished, full of color, full of life, exciting, vivid. A place that you want to be in, a well-watered garden. Now, some people say, look, I don't want a rule book. I don't want someone telling me what to do all the time and some person in the sky with a big stick beat me up all the time. I don't want to do that. I want to be free. I want to be able to do what I want. But if you follow the Bible, do you lose your freedom or do you gain your freedom? Does the Bible take away your freedom and your excitement about life, or does it give you more? I'm not a big football fan, but I live near Stamford Bridge, so I'm involved in it, especially on match days. But football is a great game. In fact, as you know, it's called the beautiful game. But imagine a football match without any white lines, the referee, the linesman, the corner flags, or all the lines and everything, or the discipline. Imagine none of that, no rules. It would be absolutely chaos. You have to have direction, and you have to have some rules. And God has given us these guidelines in this Bible of how to live our lives, not because he wants to spoil our fun, but because he wants us to enjoy it to its maximum, to its fullness. He loves us. He wants us to enjoy life. He wants it to be a beautiful game, a well-watered garden. You know, I've tried life without guidelines. I've tried ignoring rules for nearly 40 years of my life. And you know what? I really prefer some guidelines and some boundaries and some rules, and to absolutely know where I'm supposed to be. So it's inspired by God. It's God-breathed. It has the power to change lives, not only 2,000 years ago, but now, today. You're hearing about them as you go through this course. And the exciting part is God is still working today, tonight, with you and with me, if you allow him to. So God speaks to us through the Bible. The Bible is like a love letter. And you know, when you get a letter from someone you love, you treasure it, not because of the letter. It's just a page with words on it. It's because you know the person who wrote it and you're fond of them. So it's important. Me and Amanda, my girlfriend, wife now, lived apart for over 3 years when I was stationed in Gibraltar. And we used to send letters to one another. I've still got some of them here and cards. And then I got fed up with letters and we went on to tapes. But we would communicate with each other like that. And I was really excited when these letters would turn up because I would recognize Amanda's writing. I tried to read one of those letters to my daughter when she was about 10 to try and encourage her about romance. And as I started reading one, she put her fingers in her ears and went, "No, Daddy, don't. It makes me feel sick." She's 19. She's learning now. And the whole point of the book, the Bible, is that it's a love letter from God to you, so that you have a relationship with the author. It's how our faith comes alive. Like it says in Romans 10:17, faith comes through hearing the word of God. And if you want to grow in faith or start your faith or even just dabble in it, I would encourage you to read it whenever you can. Maybe start with the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. They're fun, their stories are exciting. And as Martin Luther once said, he said, "The Bible is alive. It speaks to me. It has legs. It runs after me. It has hands. It lays hold of me. It's alive. It's not a dead, ancient book." So how and when should you read it? There's absolutely no answer to that. Anytime you want, anywhere you want, however you want to do it. There's no particular place or particular time. Just have a crack at opening it and just see what happens. Read a few lines and then put it away again. See what happens. You don't have to be anywhere. You don't have to be dressed anywhere. You don't have to come to church. You don't have to do what you want. Just dare to open it. And I'm hopeless at trying to set a time and a place. And I always fail and I feel bad. But what I try to do is I try and read it, some little bit of it, one part a day, if I can. And my deal with God is we have this partnership that my part of the deal is to open it. His part of the deal is to help me read it. And we try and do that together. So try and have a plan if you can. Find some time, maybe 10 minutes a day. Find a place wherever you feel comfortable. Could be the bus, the train, could be at home, could be anywhere you want it to be. Find a pattern. Ask God to help you, to have a desire to read it. He wants you to. Ask him to help you. And the Bible in 1 year, as Toby mentioned, which you can download, is brilliant. It's really helped me. You know, I read one of the passages and I read Nikki's commentary, and if I'm pushed, as Toby said, I go straight to Pippa's commentary. And I listen to Nikki's voice because it's audio now. You can put the headphones in. And what a combination of Nikki Gumbel's voice and David Suchet, I'm asleep in 5 minutes. It's brilliant. And I wouldn't worry if you don't understand everything. Don't worry about it. The main question for you to ask is it speaking to me? Is this bit I'm reading making sense? Is it speaking into my life? Does it apply to me now, today? And the great thing is you can start this tomorrow. You can start it tonight. You can do whenever you want. And if you go through the Bible in a year, you can finish the whole Bible in a year, which is really exciting. I don't know if I've ever done that yet. I've tried every year, but I'm up to 5 years now, and I'm still not through it. So don't set yourself an unrealistic target either. Just give yourself 5 minutes or 3 minutes or 1 minute, and then you can achieve it. You can do it. However you do it, what I found is the more I try and pray, as the talk told you last week, explained to you about prayer, is us speaking to God. The Bible is God speaking to us as we read it. It's a communication. It's a relationship. And the more you pray and the more you try to read, the deeper your relationship will develop. God is the author, and he wants this relationship with you. I mentioned my father at the beginning of this talk, an enormous, volatile man. He was a hard man from Liverpool, Toxteth, and a heavy drinker. He was crude, vulgar, and often really violent, and I saw that growing up as a kid. We never really got on, and like I said, at 15, 16, we had this argument. I left home, and I never saw him again for many years. I didn't want to. When I became a Christian, I wanted to see my dad again. Why? Because I'd changed. I wanted this relationship that I thought I could have with him. I went to see him. He hadn't changed at all. He'd just become grumpier. He was living in a bedsit in a place called Macclesfield, and it was just awful when I went to see him. So I suggested that he come down to see us. He comes down to London, and I would send him a train ticket. Then I'd meet him at Euston Station, and as soon as I'd get my dad, he'd start grumbling. He'd been drinking on the train anyway. As soon as he'd get off, he would start to sort of argue with me. And then one of the things he would say all the time is, "It must be really good to travel first class, son, but I'll never know that. Even though you're wealthy, you don't really..." He'd go on about money all the time. Thought I was a multi-millionaire because I lived in London. Every time I sent him the tickets, every time I met him, the drunk, the arguments, the guilt, the shame, all on me straight away. It got so bad one weekend, I said to Amanda, "Do you know what? I can't do this stuff anymore. Hands up, I've failed. I can't do this relationship with my dad. It's too painful." And he would come and stay, and it would be hell. There'd be arguments, there'd be drinking, there'd be long silences, there'd be complaining about his lack of money. He'd be rude to my daughter, Phoebe. She'd come with toast, and he'd just make her stand there, and it'd drive me really mad, constantly making me feel bad. I told Amanda this, and she said to me, "You should pray." Not really what I wanted to hear at all. She said, "Paul, you should pray, and you should read the Bible, and you should ask God to guide you how you're meant to be with your father." I prayed. I really prayed hard, and I looked at scriptures. And at first, I didn't really think that anything would. It didn't get any better. It was still a nightmare having him down to stay, the complaining, the tickets, the money, the drunk, the arguments. It got so bad once I had to sort of get him out of the house, and I went for a walk. I had to get out of the house and I went for a walk. And I was listening to some scripture. And a piece came up that I just happened to stick in my mind. It was from the 10 Commandments. It said, honor your mother and father. And it seemed to repeat, honor your mother and father. And I remember thinking, that is not an easy scripture for me to honor these people or my father who I'm with, but I tried. And after a while, actually, it got slightly better. He didn't wind me up as much. He was still the same, but the words he said didn't cut me as deep as they used to before. And on the Sunday, he was traveling back up to Manchester. We took him to the station. There was myself, there was Amanda, there was Phoebe, and we put him on the train. And as Amanda and Phoebe were sort of settling him down, I had this overwhelming feeling of love for my dad, stood in this sort of carriage. It was really weird. And I saw above my father's head these words, honor your father. And I thought, what the heck does that mean to this man or me? And then into my head came this idea to upgrade his ticket. So I ran off. I left Amanda and Phoebe on the train. I ran off and I bought a single first-class ticket back to Manchester. I ran back on again and I grabbed him. And Amanda and Phoebe said, what's going on? I grabbed my dad and he went, hey, what are you doing? And I picked him up and I walked him into the first-class compartment and I sat him down on one of the leather seats. And then we had to get off because the doors and the whistles went and everything. And I saw my father through the window as we stood on the platform. He sat in his leather seat and he got his sort of recline thing and it went back. And then he took his trilby off and he put it onto the table. And then he got his paper out like this. And then he put his fingers up and someone brought him some coffee and biscuits and stuff. And he turned towards me. And he had the biggest smile on his face you could ever imagine. Like Christmas, Easter, birthdays, the whole lot had come. And then the train slowly pulled out of the station. And Amanda said to me, what was going on there? I said, you know what? I have absolutely no idea. I just wanted to see my dad happy. I wanted to see him smile. That was the last time I ever saw my father. 3 weeks later, he died on his own of a massive heart attack. Now, was that God helping me, or was it my own idea to go and get the first-class ticket? All I've got of a memory of my father now, through all those painful years what have gone on, all I've got is his face, turned to me, happy, smiling. That's the image I've got. All the pain, all the resentment, all the sorrow, it's gone. I've just got that picture of my dad. In my opinion, God doesn't override us. God doesn't force us to do things. What he wants to do is come alongside us and work with us. He wants us to read his love letter to us. He wants to guide us. He wants to inspire us. He wants to ignite our passion. He wants to lay hold of us and work with us. This book is a book of life. And it's always your choice if you open it. So maybe next time you open the book, or you try and open a book, or you dare to try and open the book to read something, just say, God, will you help me try and understand this book? Can we do this together this time? You just never quite know what will happen. If you open that book, and if you pray, it could just change your life. Amen.